First of all, I thank y'all for doing this. I did voluntold several of you, and even some people that didn't live in the city are here. Did for a long time. But I am Jack McCarty, I am the mayor, and I actually probably one of the few, because it was so long ago and there were few people that lived in North Richland Hills. But my parents lived by Holiday Heights Elementary when I was born. So I've pretty much been here like Mark, there's not a day, or Sean, y'all just have been shorter periods of time. A lot, by the way. Yes, to echo what Tito just said, I'll say this, I have been truly impressed with everybody that works here. A lot of people care. We've had, and we've had some staff turnover and stuff, which is always, when things change, but it's a group that's actually committed to doing really a lot of good things, and really focused on serving the city. Some of you are on here because you actually came in front of council and complained about the roads. So now whatever doesn't get done is your fault, John. That works. It will, because when you post that online, I'm just going to say. So what's the purpose of y'all being here? Both roads, but also facilities. When you look at the list of the score, there was a lot of time spent to kind of score the roads, and where they are and what we need to be doing with them. Some are actually pretty bad that need to be put on a list to get done. Some, for obvious reasons, haven't been, and we're trying to get them from money from various places. But I would say that you've got a pretty daunting task because, at some point you're going to say, gosh, we're going to need like a really large number. And it can't be that really, really large number. One, either it's because we can't have the capacity, or it's because, it wouldn't pass. Because from an election perspective, y'all know, you and the school know how hard it is to pass one for a covered workout facility that includes band also, which I thought when band jumped on board, I thought that passed. But, some of that has to do with timing as well. But just having said that, as y'all go through this, this really is important for y'all to, to show up. To be here, and please speak up. Please state your mind. I know a lot of you that I added into the list do not have a problem speaking your mind, which is kind of why you're here, because I know you will. And it is a very important task, because I will say, out of all the things that go on in the city, one of the things that people really complain and plot about are the roads. And we have been very diligent in the last two budgets, the one that, after it goes through the process, should be approved, to be both below the no new revenue tax rate, but also not create any new COs for debt, certificates of obligation to create new debt. And we've kind of just done that really in the short term because we knew this was coming up and that we would be able to spend the money being there. So I just want to say again, thank y'all for doing this. I kind of voluntold both of these guys to be the chair and the vice chair if they wouldn't mind, because I know neither one of them have a problem talking or yelling at people too, I think. So anyway.
And we're retired.
And you're both retired, yes. And we all have the same kind of haircut. So again, thank y'all very much. I appreciate y'all being here. I really do, and I really appreciate what you'll do for the city. And I know all of you care a great deal about the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
And it is truly an honor, I know for myself and for Richard also, to be asked to serve on this committee. So thank you. And I will turn it over to Paulette Hartman to tell us about general city info and growth patterns.
All right, thank you, Tito. And just to share a little bit about me, in case y'all don't think, this saying just came to me because my mom used to say it all the time, but I didn't just fall up off the turnip truck yesterday and become a city manager. I've been in city management for coming up on 27-ish years. I started my career here in North Richland Hills. I was the assistant to the city manager when Larry Cunningham was the city manager, and then I served as city manager in Copper Canyon, Texas, and then in Joshua, Texas, and then I was recruited to come back here in 2014 as the assistant city manager. So I was in that role prior to the city council appointing me as city manager. So I also have lived in North Richland Hills since I came back here, but when I was here before, we also lived in North Richland Hills. So I feel like this is the place I at least grew up in city management. And so anyway, that's enough about me. That's not why you're here. But we're going to go into a little bit of the city and its demographics and its growth over the last several years, just to sort of set up, why is it that we need to continue to rebuild streets? And we're going to be talking about some facility needs that we have as well. So I'm going to get into that information a little bit with you. I know a lot of you are really involved in the city, so you've heard this information and you're familiar with it. And some of you maybe not so much. Maybe this is your first time to get involved, and sometimes it's eye-opening to realize what size of city we are and how much growth we actually have experienced. So just to start, so NRH is a good location for development and for residents because we're centrally located in the Metroplex. We're only 10 miles west of DFW Airport, 10 miles northeast of Fort Worth, and in the heart of Northeast Tarrant County. So that is one reason why people desire to locate here, either to live here or to have a business here. Okay. I forgot. These are Craig's slides that I'm borrowing, and he has all these like pop-ups all the time. Okay. NRH profile, we are 18.2 square miles. As of the last census and population estimate, we're 73,311 residents. That makes us actually, we are the third largest city in Tarrant County. So the mayor always reminds me of that because technically, you could say it's Mansfield, but part of Mansfield is located in Johnson County, and then they have another section in Ellis County. So they are not entirely located in Tarrant County, so we still technically try to claim that we're the third largest city in Tarrant County. You can see our average household income there. Number of housing units, we're just over 30,000 housing units. Our single-family median list price there, brick and mortar businesses, 1,250 plus, with 390 of those being retail and 165 being food service. And then 24,477 workplace population and 65,868 daytime population. Well, again, all right. And then this shows you how we've grown over the decades. So you'll see we had our largest growth periods, starting out when we started in the early years. In the recent times, you can see that growth there. In the 2020s, already so far in 5 years, we've experienced 5% growth in that time. 11% growth in the 2010s, and then 14% growth in the 2000s. So if you look at that number, you've got about 30% growth just since the year 2000. And that has predominantly been on the north side of town, is where that has occurred. And we're estimated to top out at about 80,000. So you can see, total households in the decades of growth. So besides North Richland Hills, only Keller, Colleyville, Southlake, and Grapevine are Northeast Tarrant cities that continue to grow. So a lot of cities have leveled out or gotten built out, but we continue to experience growth here in North Richland Hills. This just shows you our population in terms of, Craig says kids and seniors, but the median age in 1970 was 29 years of age. In 2024 is just over 40 years. The trends in terms of population and human life is there's a greater life expectancy. So people live longer, there's lower birth rates. And as you all know, the baby boomers are the largest age segment, and they're now entering retirement. And now what we're also seeing is a lot of people, a significant number, are turning 65 last year, this year, and for the next 3 to 5 years. So that not only impacts the median age, but it also impacts exemptions on our tax rate. So that increases significantly the number of properties in our city that have frozen tax bills or whose tax bills stay the same. So that impacts city revenue. And you can see in Tarrant County, there's 13% of the population that's over 65 and 28% that's under 19. And then again, our NRH household income is traditionally higher than Tarrant County overall, and then that in Texas at $117,899. We're also more educated than in past decades, and so you can see our level of degree attainment, a four-year degree or higher, is 37.7% as of 2023, and in Tarrant County, 36.9%, and in Texas, 34.9%. So where do the majority of people who work and live in NRH come from? So where our NRH residents work, you can see the breakdown there with 22%, the largest percentage, commuting to Fort Worth for employment. But where NRH employees live, and now this is anybody who works inside the city limits of North Richland Hills, not just city employees or something like that. Most of them live, or 23%, the largest percentage, live in Fort Worth, 8% in North Richland Hills, 7% in Arlington, 4% in Dallas, and 3% in Haltom City. So, we kind of change population during the day, but you saw on an earlier slide that our daytime population actually decreases a little bit from our residential population. And so the average single-family home values do vary across the city. Beside the northern part of the city, those homes over $350,000 are found mostly in Meadow Lakes North, Iron Horse, and the hometown subdivisions. The subdivisions with appraised values under $250,000 are found in the far south part of our city, bordering Haltom City and Richland Hills, and the North Park Estates area located in the northeast quadrant of kind of mid-cities and Roof Snow. And this shows our development trends over the last few years, and it's interesting because we keep estimating that our permit numbers are going to start to decrease, and so we budget lower and lower, but then we always, for the last several years, have exceeded that budget number. So what that means is we're still getting in a higher level of permits than we have expected for the last few years. A lot of that's new construction. We actually have continued to see over $10 billion in new construction value. Trudy, I'm looking at you.
It's $100 million for this year.
$100 million, I'm sorry. $100 million in new construction value for the last couple of years, which has also been a surprise to us. But what that tells you is, again, like I stated in the other slide, is that we are a popular location because of our location in the Metroplex for development, both residential and commercial, and they're continuing to see that. So you can see the breakdown of the types of permits that we've issued the last several years. Again, we're going to scroll through Craig's animations. The development trends in new residential. So these are the residential developments that we still have kind of under construction or that are active. There are 10 new subdivisions. I can't really see very well on this slide. And so you can see them listed there, the new subdivisions that have homes under construction now, available and pending lots, which means lots that have been developed that are available for people to build a home on. That's 540. And development cycle is 2 to 3 years. What that means is from the time a neighborhood or a property is zoned and then platted, it takes about 2 to 3 years for that subdivision to kind of finish out in its full development state. And then one of the recent trends has been build-to-rent lots and build-to-rent neighborhoods, single-family neighborhoods that they're rental properties. They're not individually owned properties. And we don't have any of those in North Richland Hills, and that's one of the reasons is we don't have any that have been built like that as a build-to-rent location. Now, we do have at least one neighborhood that is a neighborhood full of rental properties over across from Richland High School. How that happened is the developer came in, got the approval as just regular single-family individual-owned lots, and then once they started developing, they sold to a private investor who bought up all the properties for private rentals. So we do have that neighborhood, but besides that, this city has not approved any build-to-rent neighborhoods, and I don't think intends to. So we continue to lead the 11-city Northeast Tarrant County area in single-family growth, which, again, we're about 95% out. So the fact 95% built out, so that the fact that we continue to lead in single-family development goes true to what I always say, which we're 95% out, but the developers are trying to build out that remaining 5% as fast as they can. Mark Wood can attest to that. So, and then I just want to wrap up this part of it with kind of our net business gain. We have been fortunate enough to continue to have a net business gain over the last 4 to 5 years. And so, yes, we do have businesses that have closed, but we also have had lots of businesses that have opened, and especially in the last 2 years, we've seen, you can see the list of some of the new ones that have opened up, and we're currently working on several more sit-down restaurants that we can't announce yet, but we are working in the pipeline. So this helps us with our sales tax revenue. An interesting statistic is we are the only city in Northeast Tarrant County, also besides Southlake, who their sales taxes trending slightly up, 1%, which is very low for them, but our sales tax is trending up, and it's about 2.5% to 3%. And we're the only city in Northeast Tarrant County this year that's seen that. And then in the budget that the council is considering now, we've budgeted a 4% increase in sales tax revenue from last year to this year. That's largely because of these new businesses that have opened. Do y'all have any questions about the demographics or anything like that? Population growth that I can answer? Okay. So Trudy will go into this next section, and we'll talk a little bit. So a lot of the reason I present those demographics is to give you an understanding of kind of our base revenues now and what our property tax, sales tax revenue, I'm not going to talk about what they are right now, but to give you an idea of where that comes from and what our trends are in that way. And so that'll lead perfectly into what Trudy is going to present to you, which is kind of a one-on-one on capital projects and how you fund them, which is largely through debt by either certificates of occupancy or general obligation bonds, occupancy. Certificates of obligation or general obligation bonds. So I spent a lot of years in development. Can you tell? All right, Trudy, come on up.
So I know that numbers are everyone's favorite, and so we're all just riveting and we can't wait, and this is going to be the best part of the presentation all night. But we're going to get through this together, okay? Please do not hesitate to ask questions along the way. A lot of the information is going to build on itself, so if you have a question about a slide and you're holding it until the end, it'd be better to just go ahead and ask along the way so we can be interactive. I want to start by, kind of level setting what is it that we're going to talk about today. We will not only talk about money today, but today we are going to do an outline of what the city's debt management strategy is. Also, we're going to go through some financial definitions, and that just makes sure that we're on the same page as we talk about many of these concepts going forward. We're going to talk about everyone's favorite, property taxes, the city's outstanding debt, our debt capacity, and we'll talk about what that means and what that is, and also some debt tax rate scenarios. So first, talking about the city's debt management strategy, we really look at that 4 different ways. The first is we leverage external resources where we can. That means we want to partner with other levels of government, other organizations that can help us to fund projects whenever we can. About 9% of the capital projects, the large-scale projects we've done over the last 5 years have come from external sources. We also look to use our existing cash whenever we can, sort of a pay-as-you-go scenario. Before we issue debt, we really ask ourselves, do we have the cash on hand to help fund that? And so over the last 5 years, 36% of our large projects have been funded from existing resources. So we are careful to invest money where we can, and that helps us to grow funds so that we've got more money tomorrow than maybe we have today to fund projects when that's possible. We also seek to maximize payment options, which means we don't always pay for capital projects off of property taxes. So we look for other sources of revenue, other ways that we can help to pay for that, and we'll go through some of our funds in just a minute. The other thing is we operate within the city's debt capacity, which really talks about maintaining the same cash payments or less over the amortization. So imagine when you bought your home, you set up front, I'm going to buy this house for this amount, I'm going to finance it for 15 or 30 years, and I'm going to pay this amount every month. But when you look at that amortization schedule and they show you how much are you paying in interest versus principal, and you see how you pay more in principal, you get towards the end, that amortization schedule is what we set when we sell debt. So we're establishing up front how we want to make those payments over time, but we always want to set those payments in a way where we have more money tomorrow we could issue if we needed to than what we're going to be paying today. And we'll go through some of those scenarios in just a second. So we're going to...
Trudy, real quick,
Yes, sir.
before you go on the previous screen, can you tell us a little bit about where we get grants?
We get grants. We partner a lot with the federal government. So grants come out as a competitive process for us to apply to get funding for large-scale projects. And typically, those are coming through different departments of the federal budget. So we may partner with FEMA to get a generator. We may partner with TxDOT to do a street. So we're getting funds through COG. We may partner with the county. There are times when, we may even get a grant that's coming from an economic development agency of the federal government. A few years ago, because of COVID, we received funds that were called ARPA that we had to use on specific things. We were able to do some capital projects through that funding as well. Yes, sir.
How much cash do y'all have on hand that could fund this?
So we have fund reserves in our operating funds and also in our capital funds. Altogether, it's north of 100 million altogether, but we're going to talk about funds in just a second. So I can't use every dollar to do everything. So not every fund can I turn around and say, hey, when someone buys a ticket at the water park, I want to turn around and hire a police officer. I can't do that. So I have to make sure I'm spending the money according to how the money was earned. And so that does place restrictions on our ability to spend money for different things. Yes, sir.
Do you like what the definition of a capital project is?
We do. So capital projects for the city could be something north of 5,000, but it also depends on what the item is. So if it is something that's got a usable life that is beyond a few years, we're going to capitalize that item. There are some things that may be over that $5,000 threshold that we aren't going to consider to be capital. Typically in our capital budget, those projects are going to be at least $50,000 in total cost. Okay. So for some definitions, the city has a fiscal year that starts on October the 1st through September the 30th. So the budget we're talking about right now that City Council is going to consider in September is going to be starting as of October the 1st. When we talk about tax rates, the same timeline applies as well. A fund, kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier, that's going to be a separate account used to manage money for a specific purpose. So imagine you can't use your 401k today to do anything and everything. It's got a specific purpose. It has penalties if you want to withdraw money early, so on and so forth. For some of our funds, it's very much the same way. So we have to spend the money according to how the revenue was earned. We also use a term called net estimated taxable property value, and boy, that is a mouthful. This is the projected value of all property. Most people think of property in terms of a house, but property for the purpose of taxes, property taxes, could be land, it could be buildings, it could be minerals, it could also be inventory. So businesses that have large inventory included within their facilities, that's considered business personal property. That is subject to taxation as well. And so all of that within the city is subject to property tax. And our tax rate is annually adopted. It is a calculation of property taxes to be paid from property owners for the year to fund essential services, including operations and also debt. Property taxes are not just something residents pay, businesses pay them as well. In North Richland Hills, we're about 66% residential and about a third or so commercial, but there is a significant amount paid from commercial properties.
Pretty
Yes, sir.
quick question. I know we're not very far down the path, but when we go into process, is this documentation, is something gonna be showed?
Sure, I think we're gonna get all the presentation itself?
Anything like that, yeah, like what you're talking, and even Paul, what you did as far as some of the setting stage, that's kind of interesting information. Here's how we got to this point. What's gonna be shared, what's publicly available, whatever. I'm sure you're gonna get to that point.
Yes, but one thing with this this group, next meeting, you'll see, we're gonna give everybody a binder, and and we'll have these presentations that you can put in there, so you can keep it as we go along.
That was my question.
But, okay, yeah.
But also some of the same data may be used. I'm assuming we'll have some public hearings right before the council calls for the election. That data is going to be available to who we're making presentations to. Not just this group. We want as many groups as possible to be educated, would be HOAs, PTA groups, whoever, that can say, here's the data we looked at, here's what our recommendation is, here's why it's going to take this much money to do it all.
Because we want to be as transparent as possible on all of it, just because it just makes it better when it's done. There's no hiding anything.
You mentioned 66 and 33. 66% of the total tax base in dollars is residential, and
In
33%
It's commercial.
dollars is in commercial and industrial, but non-residential.
Yes.
Okay. So 2/3 of the city property taxes is taken care of by homeowners.
It is.
Okay.
Okay, so you're gonna hear these terms a lot. It's important that we all know what we mean when we say a GO or CO. So a general obligation bond is debt that is paid for with property taxes that citizens vote to approve. Okay, so that's when you go out to an election and people are voting up or down whether or not that debt can be issued for that purpose. We call that a GO. A certificate of obligation is debt that is paid by the city that the city council has authorized. So one example of that may be a fire engine. We don't necessarily call a bond election for people to say, yes, we're okay with spending, $1 million to buy this fire engine. The city council goes through a process that does include public hearings, disclosures, council meetings, public votes. We go through a bid process in order to issue that debt, so on and so forth. But we're able to do that within the existing tax rate, so it's not increasing the overall rate that we're paying for debt. It's something that we know we can cover within the existing calculations, and city council is making those decisions. A debt schedule is our detailed plan that outlines how debt will be repaid over time, which does include principal and interest. And an important thing to remember about a debt schedule, again, if we kind of go back to the example of your home, you can refinance your home, right? And if you refinance it, you're going to reset some terms that are included within that debt schedule. The city has that same ability. We call it refunding when it comes to our debt. We do have the ability to restructure it at time. Not necessarily as soon as you issue it, you can go back and refinance it or refund it the next year. But within our issuances, we do have the ability to do that. So if we happen to issue at a higher interest rate, and then a few years later interest rates go down, and it makes sense for us to restructure that debt, we do have the ability to do that. Yes.
With, so GOs, that creates opportunity for the property taxes. Where does the money come from for COs?
It depends. A CO could come from property tax, but it doesn't have to. So there are times where we may issue a certificate of obligation that may be associated with the golf course, could be the water park, could be the utility fund. So if we're going to replace a sewer line, we may issue a certificate of obligation to fund that, and the water sewer fund is going to pay for that debt. So it depends on what the purpose of the project is as to how it's repaid. And then finally, we have debt capacity. That is the amount of new debt that can be issued while keeping the same debt payments each year. Okay, and we'll go through some illustrations of that in just a second. Most people think about what they pay in property taxes as the total bill, what you're paying for the hospital district, the community colleges, what you pay for the school district, the city, so on and so forth. And so this illustration really gives you a breakdown. So the property tax rates have not been set for next year yet, that October starting date yet for all the entities. So what I've done is include in what the current rates are for this year. So what you paid this year in property taxes. The combined rate for those who live in Birdville ISD is about $2.17, and the combined rate for those who live in Keller ISD is about $2.06. And you can see, and I'm sorry, on this screen it cut it off a little bit, but the portion for schools is about 55%. So if you think about $1, about 55 cents on that dollar, you're paying towards the school districts. For the county and other districts related to county operations, that's about 22 cents. And for the city of North Richland Hills, it's also about 22 cents. So we are not getting, as a city, the majority of the property tax bill that you pay. Again, this is just looking at $1, and it's looking at based on the rates that each of the taxing entities charge, how that breaks down by entity.
An interesting fact that people may not know is that, and I'll protect Joe and I on this, your tax rate for schools, we don't set that. It's set by Austin. The only tax rate that we control on the school taxes is what we've approved by voters. And luckily, every time we've been less than what we told the voters what that tax rate would be. But our interest and sinking fund, we control. And our maintenance and operation, totally controlled by Austin of how much they set that tax rate. It's based upon some mysterious formula. It'd take us forever, the whole night and even more to go about compared to Austin ISD, our property values, how property values relate to other areas of the state of Texas. It's a big, hard formula, but we don't set that tax rate. We get told your tax rate will be X. We do control what the voters told us, and that one only, and that one then has always been under what we told the voters prior to the vote.
And if we think about just the city's portion of property taxes, it really has two parts to it. One for maintenance and operations, that's how we pay for salaries and fuel and benefits and those sort of things, and then the portion that's paid for debt. And so for the fiscal year that we've just submitted to City Council to be proposed for the year, the property tax rate as proposed is at 49.7841. So of a whole penny, we're talking just a little less than 50 cents. But if we look at that in terms of the portion that goes towards operations versus the portion that goes towards debt, about 30% is for debt, and the other 70% is going to fund operating cost. So a little while ago, I talked about the fact that we pay for debt from a few different places. Not all of it is coming from property taxes. The tax-supported piece is supporting streets, facilities, and also large equipment. But we have other funds that are not funded with property taxes that also pay for their own debt. So our utility funds, that would be your water and sewer lines. Drainage fund also pays for debt. Our park fund, the aquatic park fund, golf fund, and fleet fund. So what the graph is showing you here is of the total amount that we have in our outstanding debt across all sources, what that looks like in terms of percentages that are paid for by different funds, and also which portion is for GOs and which part is for COs. And we'll go over that a little bit more in detail.
I've never seen the word fleet fund before. What does that mean?
So we actually set up a separate fund in order to track the cost of purchasing and maintaining fleet for ourselves. Fire engines, patrol vehicles, large equipment, tractors, those sort of things, and we have staff dedicated to maintaining those vehicles as well. So this is showing you our existing tax-supported debt schedule. So what we are paying per year for the next 20 or so years. So in fiscal year 44, all debt that we have will be fully paid off, and that's exciting, right? It'll all be done in 2044. But you can see here visually that what we pay in 1 year is a little higher than what we pay in the next year. So we have a declining payment schedule as our debt has been established. And that ensures that each year there is a little room in there should there be some sort of need that arises where we don't have to increase what we're paying, but we could issue, if it is recommended and agreed to by the city council or the voters, depending on the situation, there could be room there for us to take on additional need as that may arise. And this illustration kind of shows you what that looks like. So the darker area is what we're scheduled to pay, but what the lighter area is showing you if we were to keep the same payment. So this year's payment for debt that's coming off of our tax rate, if that stayed the same, the distance between what we pay versus what we could pay is what you see in the lighter area. When we sort of expound that and say, okay, what does that look like in dollars and cents? What is our actual debt capacity? What is it that we could issue in debt without increasing the tax rate? Of course, for this year, we're using this as our base year. And this year I'm saying is what's going to start October 1st. So we're going to use that fiscal as our base year. So when we look at the next year, fiscal 27, that amount would be $8 million. And fiscal 28, that amount would be $19 million. In 29, it would be $29 million. And in fiscal year 30, that would be $35 million. And so that really just gives you that visual of If we sort of don't increase anything at all, what does it look like in terms of additional dollars that we could go to the market and leverage in order to cover projects for the city? That would be on the property tax side of the house. It doesn't include the other funds. We're only talking about things that would impact property taxes.
And that's not compounded though, right? So like from 27 to 28, you only have $11 million capacity?
From 27 to 28, no, it's assuming that whatever debt we'd already have to pay would already be included in that. So we could issue 8 and then another, because of how we're dropping off on our amortization schedule. If we kept level payments, yes, we could issue 8 and then issue 19 and then issue 29 and then issue
So if you
35.
could- it's not compounded then, so it's a new 19. It's not the difference between
Correct.
19 and 8.
Correct,
It's a new 19.
correct, correct.
That's a big difference.
Correct. It is, and that because of how the payments are set to decline, yes, yes. So many people want to know what percentage of our debt that's paid for on taxes is something that went to the voters as a GO versus what maybe was approved by city council. And so this is the amount shown here. So that piece that is supported by our property taxes, 67% of that is in a GO. So 67% of what we owe, 76% of what we owe, voters have voted to approve, while 24% is from certificates of obligation. So we know that until the work is done of the committee to confirm what of the projects that are going to be proposed you all support and really want to see move forward, we don't know exactly what that number is going to be. That's why we're here. We're going to work on that over the next several months. Whatever those recommended projects are and their respective costs, that's what we're really going to hone in on to look at, well, what does that look like in terms of debt? And therefore, what does that mean for the property tax rate? And so we'll only present that to the residents. So for all the things it could be, we're going to work with you guys to do that confirmation. We'll begin our analysis, though. What we're going to present to you today is going to be at that highest amount. So that when we talk in terms of, okay, give me worst case scenario, Trudy, what happens if, everything's a go and we love everything and, so on and so forth, what does that look like? We'll start there. It's always easier to start there and then pull back than to start a little lower and work our ways up. And so that total projected cost that we're going to start with is at $100 million. And I know that sounds like a really big number. We're going to break down what that looks like. But, understand that we're not going to go, even if the voters vote at one time and they vote yes for everything, we don't go issue all that debt at one time. We issue the debt when appropriate over time. So it's not just one big sale where, boom, we just got $100 million in cash. That's something that we manage, and we manage that in part in order to manage the tax rate, but also the workload. We can't necessarily go produce $100 million worth of projects in 1 year. And we know that as staff, and so we also will time the sale of that when it's appropriate for us to be able to do the work. Yes, ma'am?
How do we know what falls under the umbrella of a certificate of obligation versus a general obligation? Is that listed somewhere in our charter, or is it just something that, I'm sure it's listed somewhere, but how would one go about finding that?
Of what we've issued, which one is which, or?
Like what you said at the beginning, if it's a fire truck, that's not something the voters are gonna vote on. How is that allocated? How do we know?
So when you issue a CO versus a GO, number one, that threshold is going to be set by what can you afford? What is it that you could issue in debt that is not going to make your tax rate go up? If your tax rate's going to go up, you got to talk to your voters. End of discussion, period, that's it. So that's going to set that ceiling for when could you consider one versus the other. There are situations where entities may say, even though this isn't going to make our overall tax rate go up, we may choose to take it to the voters. We may choose to do that, even if we don't necessarily have to. But the line of demarcation for when is it even eligible to be one versus the other is going to be your impact to the rate. Yes, sir.
Is there a type of project or as we go through and we look at the capital projects, are there types of projects where state law says you must issue debt to pay for it? You cannot pay cash for
I
it?
can't imagine a scenario.
No, there's not.
Okay,
But what's happening
I've
now?
been told by
Yeah.
other cities there is, but I didn't believe it. So,
You're saying that they say we have to issue debt for?
Yeah.
I was told that
No.
on street improvement projects, it must be debt issued to be paid for,
No,
but.
but I'll just, well, and we'll get into that too in our discussions, but it's just that there are certain projects that cost so much that you're not gonna be able to afford it out of like reserves. And then I'll also say that what is happening at the state legislature is, none of these bills have passed so far, but in the last few years, they are considering bills that would limit our ability to issue debt, and we can only issue debt for certain things. And there's even been bills that have been filed that would say that we couldn't issue certificates of obligation at all.
Yeah, that's my question, is there any absolute state law mandates that things have to be paid, that certain things have to be paid for by debt issuance?
No, but the bills that they're considering actually discourage debt.
The opposite of what you
Right,
asked.
right.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of any law that says you have to issue debt for such and such. That's just mainly determined by what we can or can't afford out of our operating funds or out of our cash reserves.
Would it also depend on the cost?
Sure.
Yes,
Of
the
the
cost,
items.
right, yes,
And also the lifetime of repayment.
right.
Like, how long does a fire truck last, chief? 20, you amortize it 20 years?
16 years.
12, say 15 years for easy math, but a street project is gonna have to be amortized longer than that, 35, 40 years. So you can pay that debt in a longer period than you would, or 50, you're
Right, and and very much to your point, we make sure that when we're considering the issuance of debt, that the useful life of whatever that project is far exceeds the amount of time that we're gonna pay on it. So that we don't find ourselves where we're still paying on that car and then we wanna sell it, right? We wanna make sure that we paid things off and we still have a lot of useful life left on that item, so that we can enjoy that without debt associated with it. And also want to say, again, debt will not be issued all at once. It'll be issued on a schedule based on several factors, and that is going to include design timeline, total costs, our debt capacity, and also market conditions. There are times where it makes more sense to issue a little more if interest rates are favorable, as opposed to a situation where maybe they're not so favorable, and so now isn't the perfect time to do that issuance. But an important note too is that each project will stand as a separate consideration for voters at the ballot. So this is not an all or nothing. This doesn't mean people only have one opportunity to consider all the projects that will come forward. So because each one sort of stands on its own two legs, we're also able to consider what this means in terms of debt and how that's issued over time based on those individual votes. Okay, so this is a heavy, yes, sir.
On that 100 million, what's the timeline to complete all the projects? Is it over 3 years, 5 years?
So we would consider probably a 4 or 5 year schedule to issue the debt. But in terms of timeline for each project, we'll get into that when we start talking about what the projects are, the project scopes, et cetera.
So just kind of as an example of what you're talking about, on the 2020 street bond election, we issued, the voters approved, and we issued 49 million total in GO bonds. And we told the voters that we would complete those projects within 5 to 7 years. By 7 years, every project would be, and that was 27 streets, and we're gonna hit that, and we're gonna be within the budget, within that 49 million and some change. So when we are starting to wrap up our recommendations and look at the tax rate impact and things like that, and look at these projects, then we'll be able to give a realistic time frame of when those projects would be done, because this time we're gonna talk about street projects again, but we're also gonna talk about several facility projects. And so there's some things like acquiring land or different things like that that'll impact the timeline as well. Does that make sense? So it's not like a hard and fast, this is how it's gonna be, but what Trudy's talking about is we schedule out our issuance of that debt based on when we can pay and when we're gonna do the projects. Because if we hold on to the debt too long and we make too much money in interest, for example, on it, we have to pay it back. So it's called arbitrage. So, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry if you said this already, but work through the projects, who recommends the project?
You do.
You are.
Okay.
You do. That's why we are gathered here today. So we are going, so what we are starting with the money part, everyone's favorite, but just wait. the rest of the agenda,
Yes.
we're gonna get into what projects are, and these are projects that staff has assessed that we believe we need to consider and that we need to look at. But really, the work of the committee is to help be that gut check, that litmus test. Hey, you all tell us, this is what we're recommending. We're the doctor, you're the patient, right? So we're gonna make recommendations, but we're looking for you all to level set what is it that you wanna recommend going forward to the city council in order to call an election, and then eventually to voters in order to make that decision.
Got it.
Okay, so there is a relationship between how all the things that we're going to talk about goes into the overall tax rate. You're going to notice a theme here as I go through these different sections. So the first thing is when it comes to project costs, that $100 million, boy, it sounds like an awful lot of money. For the purpose of doing our projections and analysis, we're going to be really conservative. So we're going to start with, hey, what do we think is going to be likely the worst case scenario? So we're going to begin with that highest potential cost. Then we're going to look at what are our values of property. And we talked earlier about, what is the net estimated taxable value. Again, we're going to do a conservative estimate on this where we're going to begin with our current values and we're going to assume zero growth, which is not realistic, but we're going to assume zero growth because that always puts us in a position of beating the market, right? If we assume zero and we get any growth at all, then boy, we've done better than we thought we were going to do when that happens. The next thing is we're going to look at our annual debt capacity. So within any given year, based on our current schedule, how much do we know we can issue without impacting the tax rate? So we're going to look at our current payments, and we're going to assume level payments when we go out to do our issuances. And then we're going to look at our debt structure. So there are different things, again, if you kind of think about buying a house or buying a car, there are different things you can build into that debt that can make the structure of that a little bit different. We're going to start with current interest rates, and we're also going to build in a little bit of cushion. You never know what the market is going to do. So I can't assume that today's rate will be the rate, but I can assume today's rate plus some inflationary factor is a good projection. And then we also can look to optimize structuring the new debt, and we can look at considering restructuring old debt. So what's already sitting on our amortization schedule that may be available for us to look at refinancing, maybe get some better terms. And if we do that at the same time as issuing new debt, it makes the overall cost lower for the taxpayer. So we'll look at not just new, but we'll go back and look at what is it we can restructure. And then when it comes, yes, ma'am. That's okay.
I'm gonna say, so how are things like catastrophes or like economic downturns such as like a pandemic or something like that, how is that factored into this?
That's why we don't spend all of our reserves or plan to spend all of our reserves at any given time. So our council has been really diligent and worked really hard to make sure that we have those safeguards in place. We brought forward to council with really their direction and their support to have what we call a fund balance policy, which says based on the different types of revenues that we receive, and they're sitting in these different funds, and I can only use this money to do these things, how much money should I make sure that I am reserving within that fund after all of my revenues and expenses are settled in case for some reason I need to buffer or smooth out for my revenues not being what I expect or my costs for some reason being higher than I expect. And so each fund has got a different percentage associated with it based on what the needs are within that fund. So our general fund, for example, is how we do most things. That's got a really high fund balance minimum because if all of a sudden things soften, we don't want to immediately have to resort to cutting services. We want to rely on revenue that we already have as much as we can to help smooth out for that before we start saying to citizens, we're going to have to make these hard decisions, these tough decisions, and no longer provide this service or cut back on that service, so on and so forth. So for the general fund, for example, it's 33%. So, imagine if, everything you spent in a year, you said, well, I got to have at least 33% in the bank, for any given year. So it is pretty conservative, but that puts us in a position of smoothing out in case anything goes a little to the left. And then when it comes to tax rate implications, again, we're always going to start with a very conservative estimate. We begin with our total debt service. We compare new debt payments with what's already something that we're obligated to pay, and then we look at the change in the rate based on those two factors. Everybody's favorite, a big old spreadsheet. But the point of this spreadsheet really is just to say, if we looked at issuing $100 million and we did that over the course of 4 years, and we did 25 million per year for those 4 years, how does that change the tax rate? So if we start, this is only the debt portion of the tax rate. Remember, we have two parts. One part that does maintenance and operations. Debt, we're only talking about the INS, the debt portion, and that's all that's shown here. So that last column in green, column 9, is going through how would that change the overall rate on the debt side of the house in this scenario. And this is one more scenario. So this is if we look to level out the column 10. So you'll notice in column 10, for the most part, once it gets to that 19 cents, it's kind of holding steady there for a few years. If we were really looking just hold that amount steady as we could, how much could we issue per year, assuming zero growth? So if values stay the exact same, which again, we don't expect that to happen, but in worst case, if things stay the exact same, how does that change? You'll notice the area in yellow that's highlighted there. The reason that's highlighted is because we could do some refunding in those years and we could get the rate back to the 19 cents. But it's shown here if we didn't refund it, but just know that we could do some refunding and get that amount down to the 19 cents. We're not making recommendations today. We are not saying this is what we're going to do. We're not saying this is what we think you should do. What we are saying is we've already done some homework, we've done some legwork, we've looked at what these impacts would be, and we want to make sure that we're providing that information to you, and we certainly can provide information along the way as well. But until the projects are determined, we don't really know exactly what this will mean in terms of impact to the rate. This is just providing you all with some preliminary information. And so when we look at the average single-family home value of North Richland Hills, when this is the values that have just come out to us at the end of July. So when people pay their next property tax statement, these are just average numbers. I'm not saying that there's one house or 10 houses or 20. They're the exact number, but this is the average value that's been provided for this year. At our current tax rate, when we look on just that debt side of the house, it's about 15 cents per $100 of taxable value, and at the highest projected rate. So in the scenarios I just gave you, that 19 cents really becomes that highest projected rate. There's a difference there about 4 cents, right, between the 15 cents and the 19 cents, and that difference is about $114 per year. So that just gives you some round numbers to think about. Again, we're not making recommendations today. We don't know that you all will want to do 100 million in projects. We just want to make sure we are providing the context for what that may look like. Okay. With that, I'll take any questions about this section. Yes, sir.
The decisions we make, will that affect the pension fund, or can the pension fund affect?
No, so the pension plans for employees, that would be considered an operating expense. So that wouldn't be on this portion of the tax rate, and so it would not be impacted by this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I know that's a lot of information, and I know y'all are all sitting there thinking, okay, if the rest of this goes that long, we're gonna be here all night. It won't. The rest is very high level, but like Trudy said, we wanted to hit you with that number side first, and we will revisit that as y'all begin to really come down to discussing your decisions. So over the next few months, basically a school year, like Trudy pointed out, we're going to spend time going through the projects that we as staff would propose in detail. So giving you time to look at them. We're even going to take you on some tours. You'll be able to ask some questions, and like the mayor said, we not only want you to speak up, we want you to ask the hard questions, because then we'll wrap it up and we'll spend your last, month or two of meetings really just coming down to those recommendations to the council, really looking into the projects that we would recommend. If you recommended all of them, what's the impact on the tax rate? And then you all will go through a process of kind of prioritizing, one, based on what you think the taxpayers would vote for based on need and would be willing to have their tax rate increase. But also, like Trudy said, we estimate conservative both on the tax rate impact and on the project side, so meaning we're going to bring you the highest possible project cost that we think it would be without going way overboard. But then we're also going to bring you tax rate impact estimates that don't factor in any growth in value, which we know doesn't happen. And as an example of that, in 2020, when we went out to the voters for the street bonds, we told them that it could result in a 3-cent tax rate increase. But what actually happened is since 2020, we've decreased the tax rate 7 cents. So that didn't actually come to pass, largely because of the growth in values that occurred in that time. So, so that's just an example, and I know the numbers are overwhelming. I am not a numbers person, and that is not the fun part to me. But you know, you look at Jack, Trudy, and Chase, and they're going to say, "Yes, this is the exciting part." So we're going to get into the rest of this meeting. We're just going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to let you know kind of what the laws say about when we can hold elections, and then Caroline's going to come up and just give you a high-level overview of the types of projects that we're going to be presenting to you over the next few months. And then I do want to make sure that we're looking at our meeting calendar to be sure that most of you can be there. So you should have a copy of the dates that we would propose. And so I need to hear from you. If most of you are like, I can't make the first and third Tuesday, okay, we probably need to go back to the drawing board on that. But we want to talk about that. So when it comes to elections, cities can only hold elections on uniform election dates by the state law. And those are in May and in November. So the regular elections that happen in November, that's one of them. And then in May, it's the first Saturday in May is when our local elections occur. So that's when you see city council elections. What we are going to be shooting for is for this, if there's a bond election, for it to happen in November of 26. So that gives you plenty of time to go through these recommendations, ask the tough questions, and then when you make your recommendations to council, it gives them a little time to consider that as well. However, to have an election in November, you have to call the election by August. So the election would have to be called by their first meeting in August of 26. And so that's how we've laid out your schedule, is for your work to be complete by June of 26, so that then you can present your recommendations to council that in June. So to give them plenty of time to consider those recommendations. So that also could change. It's such a fun time when our state legislature meets, because another thing they would like to change is some of those uniform election dates. However, the change that most of them try to get passed is that we can only hold elections in November. So we're already planning for a November election date, so that might work out if that's what happens. Any questions on that piece of it? Yeah.
Paulette, are we shooting for like 6 o'clock on each one of these days?
Yes, so we would shoot for 6 o'clock start time, and we would commit to not having the meetings go over 2 hours. So we actually are going to try to keep it to an hour and a half, but we will adjourn by 8. That's kind of the wishes of your chair and your co-chair. And if we have to finish up at the next meeting, then we'll do that. And also, just so you know, the meetings in October and the one in November will probably take place elsewhere, because we'll have elections going on in this room. And it'll be a good time for us to do some of the tours that we want to take you on. So that's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, Caroline, you want to give us a high-level overview of the types of projects?
Okay, I do really quickly, on the topic of bond, want to give an update on the 2020 bond. I know Paulette had mentioned some of those figures. Just under 50 million in projects, and you can see that red line on the. This is showing the major streets. It's a total of 27, 10 majors, 17 residential streets. All the residential streets are done. I've got traffic cones there on the major streets showing the ones that are under construction still. Of course, Glenview Drive, Main Street, and Ruth Road are all under construction. We are about to start construction on North Richland Boulevard, and Harmonson and Chapman are both under design right now. So this kind of goes to the point of, one, where we are with the bond we recently did, but then also staying true to that 5 to 7 year schedule that Paulette mentioned. So we'll get on to what we think the 2026 bond candidates would be. First one, of course, is street projects. I love this stuff. The same way that Trudy loves the the financial math, I love the kind of the engineering and the street math. So just kind of want to touch real quick on kind of what that process looks like, because it's not as simple as saying, hey, I want this street, you want that street. So this is just a quick look of what that process is going to look like. So step one is going to be to revisit the 2020 bond project lists. So these are products of that actual process that we went through with the last bond committee, and you can see these red lines are where that funding limit stopped. We evaluated, all of these streets, and so we're going to start by looking at that, not to say we're going to pick up where we left off, but at least to look at that for reference. Step two would be to go to the most recent pavement assessment that was performed on all of our streets to get the condition rating. Step three would be then to...
Caroline, would you
Yes,
go
sir.
back?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what this process is?
Sure. So we had our first pavement assessment in 2018, 2019. It was a game changer for us. So instead of visual assessments done by city staff, we actually hired a firm to come in, drive the streets, and collect actual physical data. So we did that. It was fantastic. We had that objective data that we could work from. We redid that in 2023. So I don't know if you guys saw this rig, but it's an external consultant, and they drove around town, and they're collecting all kinds of physical objective data on the roadway conditions, the rideability, the cracks, the whole host of things. And coming out of that, we have a condition index that we can use for every street in the city. And it's we still have a relationship with that consultant, so that as we're doing all this work, as we're finishing the current bond streets, as we're working on the millions of dollars in preventive street maintenance, we can then go in, update those street conditions, and make sure that they're taking all of that into account.
Sorry.
Yes,
As a
ma'am.
person in small business, how is that consultant selected? Is that a bid process? Is that a vote? How do you get to who does that work?
That was a request for proposals.
Okay, so a bid process.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Did you have a question? Sorry, I thought I saw a hand. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Step three would be to build on that condition data. You can see here, it looks like the fourth column, we've got condition rating. There's a whole host of things that go into that street selection. It's not purely condition. We want to take a lot of factors into account. Things like traffic volumes, whether they're regional or just for North Richland Hills. The cost actually comes in. How shovel ready is the project going to be? Do we have that right of way? And then step four will be to take all of that data and perform an evaluation, and then come back, and that's where you come in. We can provide all of this information, a ranked list, and then you can decide. Like Trudy said, it's that gut check, and that's what we did with that last committee as well. We had developed that quantitative ranking list and made sure, working with the committee, that they were in agreement with that. Okay, so we'll move on from streets. The next thing is going to be in Cecilia's realm at the library, and hopefully all of you have had an opportunity to visit our fantastic library. So of course, library is located there in hometown. It opened its doors.
We're 18 years this year, so 2007.
Okay.
To do math backwards.
Yep. So the needs at the library are to expand the community room. Hopefully you can see in these pictures. The picture at the top, I believe that was taken at Grand Hall because they exceeded the capacity of the library to serve the needs of some of their special programs. And their programs have grown incredibly, very, very popular. So expand the community room, that would be an actual expansion out of the library footprint. They also, there's an increased demand for study rooms, and there is a need for several reasons to reconfigure collection locations, to separate the children's collection definitively from the adult collection. Another couple of projects, kind of lumping them together, fire stations 2 and 3. For those of you who are not aware, we have five fire stations here in town. Fire Station 2 is located on the south side of town on Roof Snow. Here's a picture of what it looks like from the street, constructed in 1989. Fire Station 3 is located on Davis Boulevard. This is across from the community garden. constructed in 1990. Both of these facilities are now, 35 years old, and they no longer meet the modern safety standards, operational requirements, and also because of the age of the building, those major building systems are starting to reach their end of life, requiring a lot of maintenance. The next category is our service center. This is our Municipal Public Works Service Center. Probably not something that most of you have had the opportunity to visit. It's kind of hard to see on here. This is an up-close aerial view of the yard there. This facility is located just east of the Bechtold, south of Mid-Cities, west of Iron Horse, kind of near the animal shelter. Another reason I really wanted to include this picture, you can't see obviously inside the building. We're busting at the seams in there. We've got over 80 people, fleet and public works, and you can see how just because of the limited size of the yard here, we've got equipment that has to be parked tandem like that, which is a little less than efficient. The service center was built in 1986, home to public works and fleet operations. So that is that very high level view. So we're talking streets, we're talking library, we're talking fire stations, and we're talking the service center. Any questions?
On the streets, will they be suggesting materials they should be using to repair the streets or to rebuild the streets?
That's definitely one of the things that with our last bond that we had discussed. So what we did, because we wanted to stretch those dollars as much as possible, the decision was made for the major streets, by classification and by volume, those were going to be concrete. But in order to stretch those residential dollars, we did our residential rehabs with asphalt. But that's something, that's going to be part of the discussion
But
that
the
we're going to be
budgets
having
that
with
we
you.
outline, recommend would probably point the direction that we need to happen.
For the fire stations, would those be reconstructions or is that renovations?
I think the intent is a reconstruction.
Besides the age of the facilities and all the equipment has also gotten a little bit bigger.
So if you're planning on reconstructing them, would you just be flapping what's there and rebuilding the same place or building someplace else?
In order to retain operational capability, it would probably be finding a different place to build.
Yeah, so, and those are the kind of details, again, we're gonna spend a lot of time on all of the projects. And so when the chief, and this will start next month, we're gonna focus on those fire stations. So Chief Tenney will be providing those presentations, and he'll start off with, kind of the age and condition of the stations, and then what we're talking about in terms of reconstruction. But we are on both of them talking about a new location. And so possibly there's one that could be there, or it could be somewhere else. And those are the kind of things we'll talk through with the group. And probably the second meeting in September, we'll actually take a tour of those stations so you can see for yourself the conditions of those two stations. So there was another question that came up that I was gonna, and I just want to clarify. So anything that we're proposing for a bond related to streets, those are going to be complete street reconstructions, maybe some what we call rehabilitations. But anything that's maintenance or repair is covered in the preventive street maintenance program that we do, that we fund every year through the budget. So things like potholes and crack sealing and those kinds of things, those are going to be handled in the preventive street maintenance program through the operating budget. These are all going to be complete reconstructions. And when you get into the street segment of the program, one of my favorite slides and presentations is the life cycle of a street. So we do that so you understand that streets reach a point where maintenance and repair isn't going to do anything to extend its life. You have to completely reconstruct it. And we just happen to be at a stage in our city's growth and development that we have a lot of streets that need complete reconstruction. So all those details will be shared as we get into each different subject. Justin?
What about the utilities underneath the streets?
Yes, that also, again, that does impact really more the timeline. Glenview, which is the first project we started with, and it's almost done. It's gonna be done. Speaking of that, a utility, the relocation of some gas lines under there is what delayed that project significantly. So we do consider those things, yes. But the question is it more like,
Water, sewer, storm drain, city, so.
right, so
Sidewalk.
that's included in the project, yeah.
We're not gonna put a brand new street on a sewer line that needs to be reconstructed.
Paula,
Uh-huh.
you or Caroline, I'll watch it if I say it, but, you know, at the beginning, talking about, like the grants and all. Okay,
Yes.
About that piece, and then when we had the last, street bond, and Iron Horse Boulevard, and how things happened along the way that allowed us to do more with some money because of grant money that we got,
Oh, yeah.
remember?
Yeah.
So, because of the pandemic.
Yeah, so the Iron
So
Horse
that-
Boulevard project in particular, we ended up, some grant opportunities came available as a result of the pandemic that weren't available before when we were planning. And so we actually funded a lot of the Iron Horse reconstruction with, it's actually an economic development grant from the Federal Economic Development Agency that we were able to get that helped us offset the costs on that project alone, which is one of the reasons why we are coming in within budget on this, because our costs also escalated a lot in the process of all of this. But through some of those grant opportunities and other things, we were able to maximize the bond funds so that we're coming in within budget. Yeah, good question. Yeah. So that's also what happens. As the project goes along, we look for different opportunities to offset those funds still, even though if the voters approve all the projects that we put out there, we're still going to look for other ways to offset the costs.
Talk about, a little bit about the relationship with the county.
Yes, so we do also, and this all comes largely in play with our preventive street maintenance program, but we do enter into interlocal agreements with the county from time to time to rehabilitate roads. So we are about to do one for Shady Grove Road, which if any of you live up there, you're going to be so happy. My mother-in-law is one of them, and I'm going to be so excited when that is redone, and she doesn't complain to me every time she has to drive down that street. But so those are things that we do. We also did Meadow a few years ago, I think it was. So we do, and that saves us costs because all we're paying for there is the materials. So
You brought up Shady Grove, what do y'all do on streets that split cities?
with other cities.
With other cities, like
So, right, so this agreement we're working on right now with Judge O'Hare, Keller will share in a piece of that, and we will share in a piece, and then the county's actually going to end up covering the bulk of it, is where I think we're going to end up. So we do try to enter into sort of partnership agreements. That's why I say interlocal. That's an agreement type between various government entities. So we'll have 3 different parties sort of contributing funds to that. So.
Were most of those streets residential or arterial?
The streets that we did in the bond program?
From this, which y'all just your list that you came up with.
Most of them were residential. In terms of number of streets, the cost was driven largely by the majors, but the majors were collectors. Most of our arterials are done at this point.
Okay, yeah, these are good questions.
Paula, one quick question, and Caroline, it goes to the list of streets. I'm just curious. I get why we're here. It
Yeah.
makes perfect good sense, but so, what we're looking at is a list, and for lack of a better term, it's pre-vetted.
Well, yes, we're gonna start with okay.
But
on
we
all
can add to that list.
Yeah.
So that's,
right,
I mean, not
right.
that I'm good. I was just
Right.
curious to know, would you come up with a list of 20 streets, I'm making this up.
They're looking at data.
You guys came up with a list.
With streets particularly, we'll start with that list that we ended up on, what was left, and then we'll apply the new data from our street, our pavement assessment project that we did. Then we'll also apply even updated data since that of the streets that have been, that have, had the preventive maintenance or been redone since that. So it'll be partly pre-vetted, but with the new data added. And so you'll kind of start with that list. And yes, to Richard's point, you could add, But that's why we'll kind of show you the evaluation criteria. And it's just to make sure that there's some standard by which we're measuring what streets are we doing and what streets are we not doing. Yeah. And some of the streets that recommended may be preventive street maintenance candidates also. So, yeah.
And
Okay.
once we tour them, you'll know why.
Yeah.
Well, I just said something, there's two firehouses over there, I'm sure the police department, somebody's banging on the door to heck, can we have something changed too, or whatever, so.
No, I think the police department's pretty happy with their new facility. And I did want to mention that the only reason Chief Garner isn't here is he's at a chief training program that they're required to do each year, so he's over there. But so we didn't like exclude him or anything. I don't want anybody saying that. But no. I think that think that their facility is amazing. So it's,
Either Paulette or Caroline, one common question that I always got after we passed the bond issue is, okay, why aren't you working on all the streets now?
yeah.
Instead of, spacing them out over 7 years.
And that has a lot to do with our capacity to contract those out, but also those debt payments and debt issuance and scheduling that out appropriate to how much we can pay at a time, but how many projects we can contract out at a time, if that makes
It's
sense.
also contractor capacity.
Right.
Contractors
That's
can
what
only do so much.
Yeah.
If you ask them to do more, it may cost you more. So it's only, contractor capacity. Even our inspections department, they have the capacity that they can do.
Right.
You can't overload it and expect it to be the same high quality. Sometimes you gotta spread it out that extra year or two to make it come in right.
All right, these are good questions.
Is contractor selected, like she was asking, on low bid or on best value?
Our roadway projects are low bid.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions about that? And again, obviously you're going to be processing this as we go along. You'll have questions, and then we'll give you the information next time to start taking home and kind of thinking through it. And so if you have questions along the way, feel free to email myself or Caroline or Trudy. We can try to answer those as we go along. But if we want to look at the future meeting dates.
Yeah, at your place, there's a future meeting date, and if you can tell, we're looking at 2 meetings a month, first and third Tuesday of the month, with the exception of November and December. So because those are holiday months. Running from September through June.
For instance, November 4th is the election day.
We're gonna
Right.
meet somewhere else.
So we would meet somewhere else on that day, which the
Some of
kind.
us work the elections, so
Yeah.
how would we do that?
Okay.
Come late or?
Yeah, in that particular meeting, we might look at scheduling on a different day,
I would,
so I'll note that, because
I
it's,
would
yeah.
not be in favor of, I think that would be inappropriate to meet
On election day?
on election.
So you're in
Vote
favor
early.
of moving that meeting day? Okay, we can look at different dates we could do that earlier in November, because we also don't want to run into like when people start
Well, you
taking
can't
off.
get much earlier in November.
I mean, not earlier, like later than that, but earlier than Thanksgiving, yeah.
Yeah.
Not gonna do it
So-
the
so we'll-
second Tuesday instead of the first Tuesday possibly.
So we'll take that into consideration. And my birthday is June 29th, so we'll be done before then.
March
17 is vertical spring break.
Spring break, okay. We can look at a different date for that. So we can bring back a revised kind of meeting schedule. Are there other dates? This is great to point out that, the majority of you would probably have a problem with.
She mentioned asking questions, sending emails, whatever. Some of you may not feel comfortable to talk, or you don't want to talk in here. As the mayor alluded, Tito and I will be glad to ask questions. Write them down, hand them to us, we'll talk about it, or at least bring the discussion up. Everybody needs to have some input. If that's easier for you, my wife would be the one that wouldn't want to talk. But if you want to write it down, send it to us, hand it to us, we'll be glad to make sure it's addressed.
Speaking of which, then, will we get a list of names, phone numbers, and email addresses?
Yes, we can provide that to you, which, by the way, there's a sign-in sheet over here, and I want you to look at it, and look at the email address that we have on, and make sure that's the one you want us to use. If it's not, there's a space on there for you to put in what email you would prefer us to use.
And what I would ask is in the next day or so, if you'll look at the meeting schedule, and if you see any conflicts, if you'll email Paulette and Caroline and Trudy in the next day or two, so that when we meet in September, we'll have a revised schedule.
So let's just talk about September 2nd. Can the majority of y'all, how many of y'all cannot be here? Let's do it that way. Raise your hands on September 2nd. Okay. And then what about September 16th? I'm not going to go through every date, just those two, so we can make sure. Okay. So we're going to start with the fire department in September, and then our plan is to move to discussing the library in October, and we'll actually meet at the library in their community room for that first meeting, but then after that, election will take place. So the October 21st meeting will be at the library, but that'll be your tour time of the library. And then we're planning to start with streets in November and probably wrap that up at that first meeting in January or the second one. So we know that one is going to probably take the longest. And then when did we talk about doing the service center?
After streets.
Okay, right after streets, so probably January, February. And then like I was saying earlier, we'd spend those last few months finalizing your recommendations, because you'll have a lot of questions at that point. And then that way, if you want to go relook at something or, reconsider something, we can have plenty of time to do that. So, all right. What else is on?
James got a question.
Oh,
National Night Out, October 7th.
is it October 7th? It is? Okay, so we'll have to change that one too. I'm sorry.
What is it?
Thank you.
National
Yeah.
Night Out.
National Night Out. What does that mean?
So National Night Out is a night where neighborhoods come out and do things outside, and the police department, fire department, several departments, city staff, mayor and council, we go and visit all the different neighborhoods holding events. And so if you're in a neighborhood that's never held an event, I can get you the contact with the police department to register. It's really a great night to kind of get out, meet your neighbors if you haven't, interact with them, talk to city staff and police and fire folks that are out at those events. Hometown does a really big one, so yeah. All right, thank you, because these are things, we put the list together quickly and we don't think about those things
Okay,
sometimes.
any
so.
further questions of Paulette or Steph? We got one more item, please.
One more item.
Hold on.
We have to do public
Take your
comment.
seats, please. We got one more item. Next item on the agenda is public comments. An opportunity for citizens to address the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee on matters which are scheduled on the agenda for consideration by the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee, but not scheduled as a public hearing. In order to address the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee during public comments, a public meeting appearance card must be completed and presented to the recording secretary prior to the start of the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee meeting. So, are there any public comments?
You didn't have to fill out a form because we didn't have them available, but
Yep.
we're required now to have public comment opportunity on every agenda. Yes.
Okay, seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank y'all. See you in September.